meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back again. This is Ken Shoulders, number 28, and we're going to go through another great chapter in The Quest for Zero Point Energy, Engineering Principles for Free Energy by Ray King. And just wanted to say that last week was super awesome. We had Chris Beskar, the CEO of Stevati Aerospace, with us in our group, and that was totally amazing. Hopefully in the future, we're going to actually try and get Moray in as well, and maybe Chris might come back as well too again. So very cool. I'm going to let Brandon go ahead and start reading.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Okay, so I'm reading from this book by Moray King, Quest for Zero Point Energy, Engineering Principles for Free Energy, Moray B. King. Vacuum energy vortices, abstract. So I'll just make it a bit larger. Abrupt motion or helical motion of atomic nuclei can cause coherent multi-body vacuum polarization in the zero point energy. Supporting evidence arises from inventions and experiments that produce anomalous energy from events such as abrupt electric discharges, plasma ion acoustic oscillations, sonoluminescence, and fractal emission. Excess energy is produced when ions process through a force-free vortex. Counter-rotating plasmas might create pair production and macroscopic zero-point energy displacement current vortices. Examples include the Swiss ML converter and Sweet's vacuum triode amplifier, where twisting lattice grains within a barium ferrite ceramic apparently induce fractal emission. So there's a little figure here of counter-rotating plasma vortices. Introduction. Modern physics views the vacuum of empty space not as a void, but as a plenum of randomly fluctuating electromagnetic fields known as the zero-point energy. These vacuum fluctuations persist at 0 degrees Kelvin, and many physicists have shown they possess an enormous energy density. Hathaway, 1991. For example, Wheeler, 1962, derives a density of 10 to the 94 grams per centimeter cubed for individual fluctuations on the scale of the Planck length, 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. The energy is not readily noticed at the classical level since the fluctuations are ubiquitous, and a standard radiation detector requires an energy difference to make a measurement. Nevertheless, there is a point of view well represented in the physics literature that shows that zero-point energy is the basis of the material world. Boyer, 1975, shows how the black body radiation spectrum, as well as other quantum events, is attributed to the zero-point energy. Senitsky, 1973, has suggested that an elementary particle's very existence is intertwined with the zero-point energy. Puthoff, 1987, has shown the hydrogen atom's stability is due to a zero-point energy interaction which prevents the electron from collapsing into the nucleus. Puthoff, 1989, has also shown that gravity can be derived from the action of the zero-point energy. And recently, Hersch, Ruder, and Puthoff, 1994, have shown that the zero-point energy could be the basis of inertia as well. There have also been proposed zero-point energy models for the photon, Scully 1972, Honig 1986, and the electron, Jennison 1978. The zero-point energy might well be the primary underpinning of all physics. Can the zero-point energy be tapped as an energy source? At first, this seems to be a blatant violation of conservation of energy. But if the zero-point energy is physically real, then there is energy available and its conservation would not be an issue. The real issue centers on the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy, for how could a system based on chaotic energy fluctuations evolve into coherence? Prigogine, 1977, won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for showing how a system can evolve from chaos into order. The system must exhibit three characteristics. One, it must be nonlinear. Two, far from equilibrium. And three, have an energy flux through it. The published theories of the zero-point energy fulfill these conditions. King, 1989, 1993. Recently, Cole and Puthoff, 1993, published a proof showing that, in principle, the zero-point energy can be tapped as an energy source without violating thermodynamics. Forward, 1984, has devised a simple battery based on the Casimir force. Maloney, 1988, where a zero-point radiation pressure squeezes charged plates together. Also, Boyer, 1976, has mathematically shown that a system consisting of a nonlinear dipole can absorb energy from particular modes of the zero-point energy spectrum. As chaos theory and system theory are applied to the zero-point energy, new models of matter, fields, and space-time arise. Laviolette, 1985,
Cool.
Winterberg, 1990. Combining the theories of system self-organization, Suzaki, 1984 et al., with the theories of zero-point energy with the theories of zero-point energy open the possibility for a new energy source. Ion motion. How can an engineer design a system that will tap the zero-point energy? Quantum electrodynamics shows that the various elementary particles interact with the zero-point energy via vacuum polarization. Scheck, 1983, and Reinhardt, 1980. Electrons, especially when in conductors, exhibit a random vacuum polarization where the electron cloud is essentially in thermodynamic equilibrium with the zero-point energy fluctuations. Thus, normal antennas, conductors, and electron circuits would not experience any net zero-point energy interaction. On the other hand, the atomic nuclei exhibit an orderly vacuum polarization with polarization lines converging steeply onto the particle. The abrupt motion of nuclei or ions would be expected to induce a cohering effect on the zero-point energy. And this has been observed in accelerator experiments involving heavy ion collisions. Salenza, 1986 et al. The zero-point energy coherence would be greater if a large number of nuclei or ions undergo synchronous or abrupt motion. This behavior occurs in plasmas during ionoacoustic resonance, and it has manifested energetic anomalies such as high-frequency voltage spikes. Linen 1970 et al. Runaway electrons, Kiwamoto 1979, and anomalous heating, Sethian 1978 et
Yeah.
al. These anomalies might be evidence for the macroscopic zero-point energy coherence. There are inventions and experiments producing excessive energy that have nuclei or ion motion at their basis. In the 1930s, T.H. Morey 1978 produced a 50 kilowatt free running energy machine that relied on ion oscillations in its plasma tubes. Brown 1989 may have replicated the essence of Morey's discovery with a resonant nuclear battery. Brown uses a weak radioactive source to maintain a plasma which couples to a resonant circuit tuned at the plasma's ion acoustic frequency. Also, the cold fusion experiments of Storms 1991 invoke coherent nuclei motion. In the hydride lattice, the deuterons or protons settle into shallow potential wells where they are free to oscillate or diffuse.
Kind of highlighted the potential wells because that's a thing from subquantum kinetics. The valleys and hills are the well in front of the ship, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he could because he mentioned Laviolette, didn't he, above?
Yep. Yep.
Um, when the lattice is saturated, let me just see what page I'm on.
Yep.
54. When the lattice is saturated, all the sites are occupied, inhibiting the diffusion and allowing the nuclei to undergo synchronous oscillations. The zero
Again,
energy,
Brendan, he talks about diffusion there because reaction diffusion is what the Turing wave is, right? From
yeah.
subquantum kinetics, right?
So when the lattice
Sorry.
is saturated, all the sites are occupied, exhibiting the diffusion and allowing the nuclei to undergo synchronous oscillations. A zero-point energy coherence might be the primary source of analogous energy in the cold fusion experiments, Jandal 1990, since not only are there insufficient fusion byproducts, neutrons, tritium, helium, etc., but excess heat is produced repeatedly in a class of light water experiments. Mills, 1991, Malov, 1992, et al. Moreover, Dufour, 1993, has created a simple experiment involving just sparking in hydrogen with a stainless steel electrode. It produces excess heat with 100% repeatability. Pappas 1991 likewise claims excess energy from sparking. Recently, Mizuno et al. 1993 have investigated proton conductors and claim their experiment output 70,000 times more heat than accounted for by the input power.
Wow.
The zero-point energy just might be the source of the anomalous energy in experiments where nuclei motion is involved. Plasma vortices. Vortical motion of plasma nuclei appear to produce even bigger effects. Chernetsky Samokin 1990 and Mikorotsky 1993 have observed anomalously excessive energy production in his plasma experiments and associates the great output with cycloidal motion of the plasma particles. Similarly, Spence 1988 has based his energy invention on the plasma spiral. Reed 1992-1994 has overviewed vortex theories in the physics literature and has concluded a particular form known as force-free vortex is a likely candidate for maximizing zero-point energy interaction. The force-free vortex originally arose in hydrodynamics and is described by the equation divergence x v equals kv, where v equals the fluid velocity vector and k is a constant. The curl of the fluid flow is the same direction as the flow itself. The name force-free applies because a fluid can spiral in this particular manner without being constrained by an external force. The curl equation gives rise to a set of helical solutions where the pitch of the helix is fixed and the radius may vary. Solutions are allowed where the radius gradually shrinks and the velocity increases, concentrating energy toward what's that?
Yep.
Toward
Yep. Toward.
Toward the vortex tip. Reed also notes that the force-free vortex occurs in plasma electrodynamics and is described by the curl of the magnetic field B. So I think this is supposed to be at times. That's not X. So the previous one I said X is supposed to be time. So
That's right.
Divergence times B equals KB. He's just put an X there. It should be a time sign.
Yeah.
Vector product. Bostick 1966 has observed the formation of the plasma vortices in his experiments and notes that they tend to arise in symmetric pairs exhibiting opposite helicity. The plasma vortex helix can also close on itself, creating a vortex ring plasmoid. Bostick 1957 has also created these in his experiments and describes a quantum condition or integer ratio of the toroidal radius to the plasmoid to the poloidal radius.
Yep.
Plasmoids also tend to be produced in pairs of opposite helicity and might well be an archetype illustration of electron-positron pair production arising from quantum electrodynamics vacuum. Ball lightning Singer 1971 has been modeled as a vortex ring plasmoid, Johnson 1965, Jennison 1990, and its anomalous persistence might be indicative of a coherent zero-point energy interaction. Igley 1986, King 1989. A vortex geometry for plasma ion motion might contribute significantly in cohering the zero-point energy.
Yeah.
The force-free vortex might be one constraint to the appropriate vortex geometry for the optimal zero-point energy coherence. But since the helix radius may vary arbitrarily, there are too many solutions. Another boundary condition is required to give a unique single-shaped vortex. The logarithmic spiral figure 1 might be a good candidate since it often appears in nature and is associated with self-organization and growth. Huntley, 1970. The spiral is based on the ratio of the golden mean, phi equals 1.618, etc., and has a fractal characteristic in that geometric forms embedded within the spiral maintain their shapes. Pumping charged plasma or fluid through the pipe, shaped as a force-free vortex, whose radius
Yeah.
contracts along the logarithmic spiral, might align with an archetypal geometry toward which the zero-point energy would naturally self-organize. Perhaps the most unusual energy anomalies associated with vortex experiments were claimed by Schauberger, Alexanderson, 1990 et al. He empirically designed a particular tapered vortex based on his observations of turbulent water flow in nature. Schauberger pumped water through a pipe that was twisted into a precisely tapered helix, whose cross-section was also shaped to induce the water to naturally undergo a second-order precessional spin as it flowed through the pipe toward the vortex tip. Normally, it is difficult to force matter to undergo precession. Yet when it does, there have been anomalies reported. For example, De Palma, 1973, has claimed to measure a weight change in an experiment where two counter-rotating flywheels were forced to precess. Lathwaite demonstrated that a heavy flywheel could be lifted with little effort if it were allowed to precess along a particular helical path. Davison, 1989. Schauberger has created a precise helical path to induce water precession, and when pumped at high velocities, the vortical flow exhibited a centripetal imploding characteristic that avoided contact with pipe walls. During such a flow, he claims to have measured a negative resistance, i.e., an energy gain, and observed a particular bluish glow around the apparatus. Schauberger also noted that water at 4 degrees Celsius would be the most energetic. Did Schauberger discover how to induce zero-point energy coherence with something as simple as water flow? There is another energy anomaly associated with water that has similarities to Schauberger's observations. When water is excited by ultrasonics, it emits a bluish glow called sonoluminescence. Walton and Reynolds, 1984. Barber and Putterman, 1991, have experimentally shown that the photon emissions are too rapid to be from electron atomic transitions, and that the phenomena represents an energy amplification on the order of 100 billion. Also, water at 3 degrees Celsius yield greater emissions than water at room temperature. Hiller et al. 1992. Nobel laureate Schweiger 1993, Schwinger, 1993, has proposed a zero-point energy interaction to explain the anomaly. Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you, Brandon. I'm going to carry on reading here. Nuclei motion in solid state. A zero-point energy coherence also might also be triggered in highly stressed polarized dielectrics. T.T. Brown, Sigma, 1977. Discovered that a charged capacitor exhibited a unidirectional thrust in the direction of the positive plate. The greater the permittivity of the dielectric, the greater the thrust, and that's really important. The permittivity, we talked about that with one of the Ken Shoulders ones before. The greatest surge would occur at the moment of the dielectric breakdown. Brown attempted to prove that the source of the thrust was due to the electrogravitic interaction with experiments in vacuum and under oil in order to eliminate ion propulsion. During dielectric breakdown, the lattice nuclei abruptly move in response to a sudden disruptive shock wave from the plasma discharge surging through the material. The abrupt event might produce a large enough ZPE zero-point energy coherence to manifest a gravitational effect. Another ener Another energetic anomaly that occurs in solids is fractal emissions, and this is what really, again, is important. When a crystal is cracked, it could sometimes manifest a persistent plasmoid-like form that is akin to earthquake lights, ball lightning formation from ground fissures. Wow. Um, Preparate?
Preparator.
Paparta, 1991, has noted fractal emissions can yield highly accelerated electrons as well as light emissions, which can sometimes persist for hours after the original fracturing event. At the crack boundary, nuclei motion can trigger a coherence in the ZPE, which becomes the energy source for maintaining the plasmoid. Similarly, Shoulders, 1991, has discovered a micron-sized charged plasmoid which can persist indefinitely on a dielectric surface that he calls electrovalidium. And of course, this is really what we're um, talking about when we do all the Ken Shoulders stuff, is this, what he had discovered. He creates the EV with a high voltage pulse discharge from a mercury tip electrode and guides it via electric fields along micron-sized grooves etched in a dielectric material. It's also important to note that Nikola Tesla worked with mercury as well with a lot of his stuff. When the EV hits a conductor, it yields a discharge whose energy is greater than the original pulse used in its creation. Puthoff, 1990, suggests that the energy is from the ZPE, zero-point energy. And it's also important to know that Ken Shoulders actually coined that term, zero-point energy. Lattice twisting, another method that might cohere the zero-point energy is to induce a ratcheting semi-vortical motion of nuclei by abruptly twisting a crystalline lattice. Lattice twisting can occur in ferromagnetic materials which subject to alternating magnetic fields, when subject to alternating magnetic fields. As the magnetic domains shift, they can launch acoustic spinner waves. See
C-plaque.
Plaque, 1980. An abrupt lattice twist can occur if the magnetic material is driven to hysteresis saturation and then pulsed oppositely.
Oppositely.
Yeah,
Oppositely.
that's a weird word. The saturation state elastically stresses the lattice, and the reverse pulse triggers the lattice to snap back. Aspen 1990 has
Aspartame.
Aspidin 1990 has identified uh, saturation hysteresis saturation as a significant state of generating energetic anomalies in magnetic materials. The nuclei motion for the lattice twist can launch the vacuum energy vortex, which manifests as an excess magnetic pulse. This type of activity could be occurring in the stators of Adams' 1993 pulsed magnetic motor, an invention claimed to produce excessive power. Carmen's father's device probably does the same thing. Um, Sweet 1991 also appears to utilize lattice twisting in the conditioned barium ferrite magnets of his solid state energy invention known as the vacuum triode amplifier VTA, which I believe is probably one of the best designs that there is. Normally, barium ferrite is used for permanent magnets and its domains do not readily shift. Instead, Sweet cracks and loosens the lattice itself with the conditioning process. The barium ferrite block, which is 6 by 4 by 1 inches, should be sintered by the manufacturer such that the ceramic is not overly hard, because if
Sintered.
it is,
I
it'll
think it's sintered by the
yeah,
manufacturer.
that's what I said. Yeah, it's sintered so that it by the manufacturer such that the ceramic is not overly hard. The conditioning is similar to how manufacturers make permanent magnets. An AC current is impressed on a coil surrounding the material to erase any residual magnetism. Then a large pulse from a capacitor bank, a typical manufacturer uses 100 microfarads at 15,000 volts, is fired through the coil to align the domains in a permanent magnet. So this is how magnets are made. Sweet's conditioning coil surrounds the 6 by 4 inch perimeter of the barium ferrite block and consists of 600 turns of number 28 wire, which is really small. He drives it at 60 hertz with a few amps and then switches a large pulse from a 6,500 microfarad capacitor at 450 volts. Values reported by Watson 1993 through the coil timed at the peak of the 60 hertz sine wave. Unless the ceramic is loosely sintered, it is unlikely one firing will crack the lattice. The barium ferrite block should then be turned over, or the coil polarity reversed, and the process repeated such that the domains are driven to the opposite polarity from the next capacitor pulse. The conditioning process should be repeated over and over, alternating the polarity each time. The process is anomalous to cold working a strip of metal by bending it back and forth until it bent or it breaks. The lattice will form microcracks and loosen such that the magnetic domains appear to readily oscillate when excited by a weak AC magnetic field. It is not really the magnetic domains that are shifting. It would be more accurate to describe the cracked portions of an acoustic domains
As acoustical domains.
as acoustical domains, since it is the lattice grains that are shifting. Thus, in a straightforward manner, Sweet has created a twistable solid state lattice that exhibits an acoustic resonance at the conditioning frequency 60 hertz. And 60 hertz, he used it because that's what our power is at 60 hertz. So it helps when it goes back, it can reproduce the 60 hertz, which is equivalent to what our power runs at. When the micro cracks of the conditioned barium ferrite apparently occur, the phenomenon that coheres the zero point energy, perhaps the shifting lattice grains induce fractal emission in the boundaries between them. I totally agree with that. At the crack boundary, nuclei motion can be triggering a coherence in the zero point energy, which maintains the fractal emissions. If grains twisting against each other induce fractal emission within the interior of the conditioned barium ferrite, a coherent plasma could be embedded within a solid, and that's the important part right there. And this plasma could to to be direct coupled.
Directly. It's a typographical error. It should
Yeah, that's right.
be
This
coupled.
could be directly coupled to the 0 point energy. The embedded plasma is controlled by the action of the twisting domains. The plasma in the boundary between two oppositely twisting grains would be subject to dual counter-rotating vortical stimulation. The conditioned barium ferrite has the magnetic domains on the top surface aligned oppositely to those on the bottom surface, especially near the edge, figure 3. The domain alignments follow the flux lines of the conditioning coil. Near the edges of the top and bottom faces, the domains are aligned nearly flat. Sweet demonstrates this by placing a thin steel strip edgewise on the ceramic surface. In the center, it stands vertically. It tilts more horizontally as it is placed closer to the edge. So that's a real important thing that he just said there. If someone's trying to recreate that, to try that, make sure that you got it the way that he had it. When excited by an AC magnetic field from the side, the top and bottom domains will twist in opposite directions as they oscillate, which is so cool. In the micro cracks between these oppositely twisting domains, pair production of fractal emission plasmoids exhibit opposite helical
Helicity.
helicity
Helicity.
might occur. Um, QED, quantum electrodynamics, requires the vortical coherent forms arising from the 0 point energy occur in pairs to conserve angular momentum. If such plasmoid pairs are generated throughout the interior of the ceramic, they could integrate into two macroscopic counter-rotating displacement current vortices. Dual vortex action is required in order to induce a current on a series wound bifilar coil, i.e., the coils are shorted at one end. Sweet places the bifilar coil on the face of the conditioned barium ferrite, which is driven by an AC magnetic field from two separate in phase standard wound exciter coils directed at the 4-inch surfaces, figure 4. In a series wound bifilar coil, current must flow up one winding, then it uh,
While it
simultaneously
is
flows down the other. No form of standard magnetic induction can induce this type of current flow. Sweet is able to tap appreciable electrical power, 500 watts from the bifilar coil, and in addition, the current from the coil is cold, i.e., thin wires, number 30, which is really small, number 30 is a really small wire, can conduct the power without being heated. So I can remember when they said that if you touched it, you got like a frostbite kind of effect because some people had done that. The current does not appear to be standard electron conduction. Instead, the coil seems to be guiding vacuum energy displacement currents, King 1984. Other inventions have observed this cold current effect. Example, Moray, 1978, used number 30, again, very small wire, in his 50 kilowatt radiant energy device. Um, Bedini observed it from his gravity field generator. Bearden Harold,
Harold.
Harold
Harold.
Mueller, 1985, and Pan
Panisi. Panisi.
Panisi observed it in his battery pulsing experiments, King 1993. To make the VTA free running, Sweet taps off some of the output power from the bifilar coil and feeds it back to the exciter coil. If too much power is fed back, it overdrives the lattice twisting and the ceramic pulverizes. So basically, it just, yeah, disintegrates. The counter-rotating vortices appear to significantly cohere the 0 point energy. There is another indication that the zero point energy is the energy source for the VTA. When running, it loses weight. Wheeler's 1962 geometrodynamics shows that there is an intimate connection between zero point energy, gravity, and the curving the space-time metric. Likewise, Puthoff 1989 suggests that the basis of gravity is the zero point itself. When driven to out, output a kilowatt, the VTA has established a weight change on the order of a pound. The only energy great enough to locally alter gravity would apparently be the zero point energy. Counter-rotating vortex hy hy hypothesis,
Hypothesis, yeah.
yeah, may also explain another well-witnessed free-running energy machine, the Swiss ML converter, and that's something that I've not seen personally, but I've seen before many times. Um, Matt Hay,
Matt,
19,
Matt Hay.
yeah, Matt Hay, 1985. Two counter-rotating acrylic
Too large,
discs,
too
two large counter-rotating acrylic discs similar to the um,
Wimphurst,
Wimshurst machine
Wimphurst
induce a colorful swirling plasma between them. This plasma would then be the
analog.
analog to the fractal emission plasmoid between the lattice domains in the VTA ceramic. The friction action of the spinning discs create the counter-rotating plasma, which induces the dual vortex, zero-point energy displacement currents. The principle of using counter-rotating plasma might form the basis for future zero-point energy machines. The counter-rotating vortex idea may, what's that one?
May elucidate.
Elucidate how to stimulate the core material of
Caduceus.
caduceus coil in order to output excess energy. The caduceus coil consists of two perfectly symmetrically insulated wire coils of opposite helicity,
Helicity.
helicity
Yeah.
wound on the cylinder. The coil wires must crisscross each other in order to be identically symmetrical. Smith wound his coils on ferrite. Yeah, Smith wound his coils on ferrite cores. Um,
Burridge.
Burridge,
Burridge.
1979, and Van Tassel wound his on quartz, and I find that's really interesting. I know lots about cores. I've never done quartz ones though. Dollard 1988, Beard in 1986, and King 1989 have suggested pulsing these coils to create abruptly bucking electromagnetic fields that result in a scalar zero-point coherence. On the other hand, to receive energy from the coil would require inducing the appropriate lattice twisting on the core material. For ferrites, a conditioning process might process much like Sweet uses for his barium ferrite magnet, barium ferrite would be appropriate. The domains would have to align along the diameter of the cylinder, right angles to the cylinder's axis, with alternate directions and regions at different heights along the cylinder. The domains would shift in respect to the exciter coil at right angles to the caduceus coil. In the ferrite if the ferrite lattice has cracks in between the alternate domain regions, then lattice twisting could induce fractal emission plasma, and the behavior of the caduceus coil would mimic the VTA, which is the vacuum triode amplifier from Sweet. It would effectively be the same as the VTA, except for the shape of the barium ferrite. Um, Lattice twisting could also be induced on high permeativity dielectrics, barium titanate, lead lead zirconate. Um,
Zirconate. I think it's
yeah,
called.
zirconate. The polarization vector of the dielectric would follow the high voltage excitation from electrodes placed on the circumference of the cylinder. At a different position along the cylinder, another set of electrodes would drive the polarization vector opposite to the previous layer in order to induce the counter twist to the lattice. Cracks between the lattice region would offer opportunities for refractive emissions. The electret, or how do you pronounce that?
An, an
Electret. The electret, whose polarization vectors are permanently aligned, would be the analog to permanent magnet material and would allow maximum lattice twisting. In ultrasonic transducer materials, the stimulation could induce counter-rotating acoustic spinner waves, King 1993. If instead of a cylinder, a toroid is used, the spinner waves can circulate and close into standing waves, and that is so important because it's always standing waves that really help us along with these things. If con
concomitant.
concomitant zero-point energy displacement currents align with those counter-rotating standing waves again, then the positive feedback of such coherence might induce a significantly greater zero-point energy interaction, produce a large gravitational effect. Summary: the observed anomalies associated in ion motion in plasmas, liquids, or solids, along with the zero-point energy theories, manifest a common theme that may be summarized in four principles. One, the abrupt synchronous motion of nuclei or ions cohere the zero-point energy. Two, vortex motion of the ions produce a greater effect, and there might be an optimal vortex shape around which a zero-point energy coherence could naturally form. Three, high-order rotations, i.e. precession, further augment the zero-point energy interaction. Four, a large macroscopic zero-point energy coherence might induce pairs of counter-rotating vortex forms since this conserves angular momentum. Today, two free-running machine inventions appear to utilize these principles and consequently produce a large energy output. The Swiss ML converter clearly has two counter-rotating plasmoid vortices since the corona is readily observed between the oppositely rotating acrylic discs. Unfortunately, there is not enough technical information available to allow widespread replication. On the basis of simplicity, Sweet may have achieved the most elegant energy device ever invented, and that is so true. Yet its behavior is complex since it appears to contain multiple pairs of macroscopic counter-rotating fractal emission plasmoids within a single ceramic block. If Sweet's invention could be replicated by the scientific community, our science and technology would enter a new era, and I suggest that's happening. So down below, I just highlighted a few of the references, and one of them was from Bearden, a gravity field generator manufactured by John Bedini. And then the other one is Bearden's book, Fer de Lance, which is really cool. And then after that, we have, yeah, this one obviously I highlighted because it's Paul Lavalette, 1985. We should actually try and find this, Brandon. An Introduction to Subquantum Kinetics.
I think he's got it
Um,
on. He's probably got it on his website,
yeah,
starburstman.org.
but it'd be neat to find this actual paper though too, right? And because it even tells you what page it is. Subquantum Kinetics Exploring the Crack in the First Law, because I've never heard that title or read that before. And it's on page 352 to 357. So then the next one I highlighted is going to be the Ken Shoulders energy conversion using high density charge. US patent number. I have that patent. We're actually going to go through it in the group here. Uh, Rho Sigma. This book you guys should all get too. It's absolutely amazing, called Ether Technology. Um, and Singer, the nature of ball lightning. Ball lightning is essentially like a charge cluster, but it's just a bigger form version of it. And then down below, Sweet and Bearden utilizing scalar electromagnetics to tap vacuum energy. The theory and operation of phase conjugate vacuum triode. So there's something really important because we haven't really talked about the phase conjugation that occurs, and that's because of the barium titanate crystals. It actually happens within them. Then the other one here is Watson, 1993, Watson, 1994, a different Watson. Private communication, and I find this interesting. So this is stuff that Moray got directly from these guys. Many investigators have attempted using a capacitance of 6,500 microfarads at 450 volts without success. A greater energy pulse or a greater AC current may be necessary to fracture the ceramic. If the lattice grains cannot be loosened via magnetic stimulation, then other metallurgical means should be explored as a preconditioning process. The values given are sufficient to align the magnetic domains in barium ferrite and can be applied once the ceramic has pockets of loose freely moving grains. And this is something that I kind of know. It's called the block well. So with a magnet, where you've got north and south, there's a block well, and that's where it kind of changes. Now, what he's done is he's actually Floyd Sweet by the conditioning. He's made that block well really wide and not narrow like it is when it's a magnet. D. Watson reported successful conditioning of barium ferrite by subjecting the ceramic to an electrostatic field between two conductive metal plates held at 20,000 volts DC for about 20 minutes before the magnet conditioning step. Barium ferrite is an insulator, unlike strontium ferrite, and as such, an electrostatic field could stretch the lattice. Also, two separate coils around the 6 by 4 inch perimeter were used, a standard coil for the capacitor pulse and a 400 turn bifilar coil for the 60 hertz entrainment signal. The bifilar coil was driven in the bucking configuration, which is going back and forth, and thus it would not induce magnetic domain motion. However, the electrostatic conditioning excites the, what's that word?
Interstitial.
Interstitial plasmoids within the lattice, and these respond to the scalar excitation of the bucking fields. Yeah, so that's some great stuff. Does anybody have any comments or anything talk about?
We can I can stop the share now.
Yeah. Um,
Um,
next time we're going to do another chapter, and it's going to go a little bit more into Floyd Sweet's device, and hopefully we're going to have Moray King. Chip, have you had a chance to talk to him again, or?
I have not. No, I'll check with him today.
Okay. Just let us know when he's available, and then we'll do that last chapter with him. That would
Okay.
be so awesome, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So, well, maybe Brandon, we can stop the recording now, and we can
yeah.
carry on with
Right.
our
Okay.
conversations.
Thank you everyone for coming today and seeing the video. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Cheers. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.